Today I want to talk about a new kind of sketchbook that I've been working with, and it's the Leda sketchbook. It's a great sketchbook. I love the size, I love the paper. It's very durable and suits my style very well. I grew up in a place called Harlan, which is between Corvallis and Newport on the coast. It's the Coast Range. It's sort of Kankakee country, logging and farming, and so very isolated. When I grew up, of course, we didn't have television. We didn't, we had radio, but so we were pretty left to our own sort of imagination, and I think that really developed my work as an artist. We're very people from that area, because of being so isolated, are very observant in a way. I think people tend to really notice things, and I think that my family definitely they're very observant, and they notice a lot of things, and I think it's just because their minds are uncluttered by the detritus of 21st century life, so I think that definitely helped. When you don't have television to watch and you don't have video games to play, then you have to create your own sort of entertainment, and it was I think we've always I've always drawn. My sisters draw. I've always been interested in art, photography, and my dad had a great shop growing up, and I spent a lot of time making things. So right from the beginning, I was a maker. I love to make things, and I love to draw, and I just and I love the area where I grew up. It's beautiful, and I love the history, and I love my family, and I work in a lot of different mediums. I draw a lot, first of all. I mean, that's an important element in my work. I've been drawing my whole life. I work, like I said, I work in a lot of different mediums, from encaustic to watercolor, sculpture, but it's all a pretty narrow focus about where I grew up and about my family and about my history. It's sort of a narrative that I develop and explore. I think the very first really good photograph I took was of my grandfather sitting by his wood stove. He had an old wood cook stove, and he would sit right next to it, and that was his place, and smoke cigars and tell stories, and so I took a photograph of him talking about his wife who had died, and he had cried, and that was I think I realized at that point that I could capture people at certain emotional moments in their life that were honest and real, and I think that's when I realized that I could be a photographer, and so that was probably my best photo that I took, and definitely the first one that was really meaningful, and it was meaningful to a lot of people as well. One thing you learn as a photographer is to notice things quickly and make a decision and capture that moment, and composition, all those things that apply to art, also apply to photography. And it was really great to use that experience. And I worked in the field for many years, and it definitely sharpened my wits and made me more observant, and just the subtleties of life, and just the nuance of timing and that sort of thing. So all those things that I learned in photography, I definitely applied to painting, especially drawing. Drawing, to me, is one of the most important things. No matter what you're doing in the arts, I think if you're a photographer, if you're a painter, drawing is just a way to clarify ideas, and it has nothing to do whether you can draw well. whether you can render well. It's more to do with, you know, narrowing your focus and becoming connected with your ideas. And I think by drawing out an idea, you kind of take ownership of it, and it becomes a really a much better way to understand what you're making. You know, there are people who say, "Oh, I don't draw, I can't draw," you know, but in reality, it doesn't matter. You know, like I said, it's not about rendering. It's about putting your ideas on paper and getting to understand them, and you know, it clears your mind. It's just very good for you. It's you know, I think everybody should draw. I tend to use animals as metaphor for either ideas or people. I tend to assign certain people an animal character. If I'm doing a drawing about, let's say, an uncle or a friend or whatever, you know, if that person reminds me of a certain animal, I will draw them as. I have a friend that reminds me of a bear, and so if I'm doing a picture about him, I tend to draw him as a bear. He's, you know, you know, or if it's somebody that might be timid or something, maybe it would be a rabbit. But I tend to use it as you know, animals as stand-ins for people. One of the things about being too pristine and too worried about control and about making things perfect, it gets in the way of a good idea. I think it tends to, it has a tendency to make you uptight about what you're trying to express, and also I think it takes you your intellect out of the game a little bit if you're a little looser and more spontaneous. Pretty much what I oftentimes do with a sketchbook is I don't like a pristine surface to work on. It's not my thing. So I will take tea washes. I just take Lipton's tea or a watercolor wash or an ink wash, and I'll just go through and I'll cover up just about every page and mess it up so it's not so perfect, and it makes it easier for me to work into. I'm less intimidated if it's not perfect. I think it's like drawing on cave walls. I think, you know, when you in ancient times you had primitive people, so-called primitive people, drawing these beautiful drawings on cave walls. I think they were responding to the surface and the colors, and I think. I feel the same way about sketchbooks. I like to have something down already that I can kind of respond to. One of the things I absolutely love about the Leda sketchbook is the paper. It's a soft, fairly thin but very durable, sort of a slightly off-white color, which I love. It's not too bright. It works really well with the colors that I use. I like the sewn binding. That's essential for me. I don't like spiral binding, for example. I like that you can put an elastic band around it and take it with you. And I'm pretty abusive to my sketchbooks, I have to admit, but they can stand up to that sort of abuse, and that's really important to me. You know, the paper is as thin as it is, it's surprisingly dense, and so, you know, and it actually the ink, and I use an ink that's pretty penetrating, but it doesn't seem to penetrate very much, and if it does, it's only because I put an enormous amount of liquid on it until it's, you know, saturated, and it's going to be my new sketchbook from now on. I've tried a lot of different sketchbooks, and this has been one of my favorite ones.